What's up, everybody? My name is Evan, this is Corey Country, and today we're going to be putting this miter saw up on a stand, as well as finding a home for our air compressor. Alright, and we're going to start off once again by cutting down some plywood for this project. This is some leftover plywood from a couple of the previous projects that is easy enough to cut down on the table saw, except for going this way. I used a straight edge of my circular saw. Making a cut like this on a table saw would have been fairly dangerous with kickback and everything, so I decided to opt on the side of safety. And those were rough cuts that I made with the circular saw, so I came back on the table saw when they were a more manageable size that I felt comfortable with to clean them up to their final dimensions. And this is actually the previous platform that the miter saw used to sit on when I had that bigger station built in the first episode. It made sense just to trim that down to the size that I was looking for. It was already pretty well reinforced on the bottom, as you can see. Those are glued on there so they're not coming off, and it really acts for a good amount of support. Assembly is super easy with these. I am actually putting the pocket holes on the incorrect way here, but I'm doing it on purpose. I wanted the smooth top. I didn't want the sides of the plywood to show through, and I didn't also want to put another false top on this like I did with the lathe station. I'm pretty confident this is going to hold. It's not going to take much of a beating, but if you're curious on how to do it the correct way, look at the lathe station that I built. It's the last episode, second episode, and you'll see that you put the pocket holes into the bottom and the top pieces, and then you get to drill those screws into the meat of the sides of the cabinet rather than the edges. I definitely recommend always using clamps with pocket holes. I believe I said this in my last video too, but there's really no reason that you shouldn't be using clamps for this. The pocket holes have a crazy tendency to pull the wood in the wrong direction, and then your joint won't be square anymore. So here, instead of just putting a drawer on top, I'm going to put a center divider as well. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually measuring out where I need the center divider to go so I can still store my air compressor on the underside of this. I'm trying to dampen the sound for this air compressor as much as possible, but still allow some airflow in it. So I'm not sure about sound suppression panels yet in there. We'll see. I don't want it to overheat or anything. So after I get all those measurements made, I use a couple of F-clamps, I use 4 actually, to attach the center divider just so I can see and make sure that it's in the right spot and we're all squared up and everything. And then once I do that, I take it over to my crazy, amazing pocket hole jig that you're probably tired of seeing at this point. And with the clamps there, it makes it really easy just to kind of keep everything lined up. Some blind feeling around for all the screws, and we are good to go. This went in really easily. I recommend using this method if you're trying to do something the same, unless you want to use just spacers. So what I'm doing here is playing it smart, unlike what I did with the lathe station. After I had the main cabinet assembled, I put the drawer slides in, as well as some scrap pieces for the plywood that I'm going to be using to make the drawers. That way I can measure exactly how long I need the front and the back of the drawers to be. When I built the lathe station, I pretty much just followed my plans exactly, and that kind of goofed me over a little bit when I went on. Just for the minor differences in the thicknesses of plywood, I was actually just a hair too big on all of my drawers. So doing it this way lets you get a relative measurement and everything fits together a lot easier. So an easy way to put drawers together, which you've seen before I'm sure, is with pocket holes. You put the pocket holes in the front and the back of the drawer and you screw those into the sides. And while I'm clamping these together, I'm taking just a couple extra seconds to make sure that my front is perfectly lined up on the front edges of the side pieces as well, just so I know everything's going to be completely square once I get the drawer together. And here I'm cutting down a piece of 1/2 inch plywood to use for the bottom of the drawer. I would have gone with 1/4 inch, but the drawer itself was about 22 inches deep by 24 inches wide, so I didn't want to use the 1/4 inch just because I thought it might be just a tad too weak. I am putting my nail guns and my stapler and a bunch of brad nails in here. In the end, it probably would have been fine to use 1/4 inch, but I had the extra 1/2 inch laying around, so I figured it couldn't hurt. And now for the install of the drawer slides. Drawer slides are a lot easier than what you might think if you're just starting out. I was fairly intimidated by them because I was always worried that if something wasn't perfectly lined up that the drawer wouldn't work, which is fairly true to an extent, but if you're just using spacers on a flat surface or you're measuring correctly, you really have nothing to worry about. So the front parts of the drawer itself can be installed just by putting a spacer underneath your drawer, inserting your drawer into the spot, and then pulling it out slightly and aligning the front pieces with the front of your drawer. And then from there, it's just a matter of pulling it out a little more, installing the center ones, and you can pull it out even further or just take the drawer out completely for the rear ones. And it just slides right in. So here I'm using 2-inch casters that I got on Amazon. The wheels themselves are great, but I'll show you in a few minutes why I'm not very fond of them. So here is how to completely overcomplicate putting in a drawer front. On the lathe build, it was pretty easy. I had enough space that I could rest the drawer front on either the drawer below or a couple spacers and then clamp it in. This one, for some reason, I didn't think just to drill holes where I'm putting the mounting hardware and use that to attach the drawer front in the spot that I needed. So instead what I'm doing is I'm taking 2 straight edge piece of plywood and lining it up with the top and then making it line up on the sides as well. It was way overcomplicated and I feel bad even putting this in the video for you to watch. So this is my first time using this jig. I have never installed hinges on a cabinet door before. I've never really done doors actually. Drawers are pretty much the extent of what I've done. So this jig is awesome. The part that's not awesome is remembering exactly which hinges to use, because I definitely didn't do that. And yes, the jig is fun to clean. So what I'm doing here is using a chamfer bit to take some off of the bottom front edge. Otherwise the locking mechanism on those wheels clips it and it doesn't work. Alright, so for those of you that don't know, I'm going to enlighten you. There are different kinds of European hinges. And the first ones that I put on were wrong. So these are the first ones I put on. They are for face frames. This cabinet doesn't have face frames. This cabinet needs these, frameless. They are barely different. It is labeled on the package, which I should have looked at, but didn't. It's a pretty quick fix. Luckily for me, all those little circle holes that I did on the doors, they work just fine. So I already remounted the other one. Fits a lot better. The issue I was having with this is it was bringing it too far in toward the center, and then my doors were, instead of like closing normally, they were closing on top of each other. Obviously that's a bit of an issue. Luckily I actually had these because I buy too much stuff. And another side note, it's a lot easier to put the cabinet on the back to install these rather than trying to shiv it up and hold it there. That was a pain. So it's on its back now and it's a million times easier. Aren't you glad you can see everything I'm doing? Basically, to explain it really quick, I'm leaving the door closed so I know about where I need the door to be, and I'm drilling small pilot holes and then putting screws in. It's working out, but you can't see any of it. Alright, so I'm having a bit of the same issue, but you can adjust these. So they actually fit without having to cram anything down, and it'll leave a little bit more of a reveal between these, which is exactly what I'm looking for. So this one I already adjusted and it's flat on this side. So this one, now that I just installed it, I can use all the little adjustment things and pull it further away from the center so we won't have that little collapsing issue. Alright everyone, that is the miter saw and the air compressor up off the floor on its own little rolly cart. I am super pumped for how much space this alone has opened up. Off camera, I also put together a pretty shoddy mobile cart to put my belt sander, my grinder, and my planer on. It's nothing worth showing off. It's some 2x4s with a couple half-inch sheets of plywood. It's not pretty, so we're just gonna leave it there. If you've been following me on Instagram, you can see from the first episode just how much floor space we've opened up by putting the table saw, the miter saw, the air compressor, the 3 tools on this cart, and the lathe up on their own carts. There's so much more room in here just for that. It's incredible. So with this miter saw station, the miter saw is now on top. It is bolted down and it is sitting nice and level. It's gonna be really nice not to have this on the floor anymore. I'm sure my back will appreciate it too. Inside the drawer, we have our 16 gauge, our 18 gauge, and our pneumatic staple gun, as well as all of our brad nails and staples. I don't think I need a separator in here. I think we should be okay without it. And then on the lower side cabinet, we have our air compressor. The only thing I might do with this is I might feel the need to put a couple of sound dampening panels on the inside of it, probably side to side. And with that, we are all done with the 3rd episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed this one. If you're looking to support me, I take likes, subscribes. If you want to send me your next paycheck, I'm kidding. Leave some helpful comments down below. I appreciate that as well. And we'll see you next time.